Paying $14,000 to fly my family to my graduation earned me 3 empty seats in the reserved row and a single cruel Instagram comment they all liked from a beach in Greece. The silence in the auditorium was heavy, but the accidental voice recording I found on my phone later that night was louder. That audio file didn't just break my heart, it rewrote my entire history. My name is Chloe Cruz, and for 28 years, I have existed as a footnote in the biography of my own family. If you look at the family portraits hanging in the hallway of our 2-story craftsman house in Redwood Hollow, Montana, you might think we were normal. You would see Douglas Cruz, the stoic father with the strong jawline, and Lillian Cruz, the mother with the perfect blowout and the tight, camera-ready smile. In the center, radiant and glowing, you would see my younger sister, Sienna. And then, usually off to the side, blending into the beige wallpaper or standing just a little too far apart from the core trio, there was me. I was present, but I was not part of the composition. Growing up in Redwood Hollow felt like living inside a snow globe that someone else was shaking. It was a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did, and appearances were the only currency that mattered. In the economy of the Cruz household, Sienna was the gold standard. I was the copper penny you found on the sidewalk, useful to round out a sum, but otherwise worthless. From the moment Sienna was born, the hierarchy was established with the solidity of a mountain range. Mom called her the family treasure. It was not a pet name used in private moments of affection. It was a title, announced to neighbors, teachers, and anyone who stopped to admire the baby in the stroller. I was 4 years old when she was born, old enough to understand that the temperature in the room changed when she entered it. The air became warmer, the lights brighter. When I walked in, the temperature remained strictly room temperature. My father, Douglas, never explicitly said he loved her more. He was a man of few words, a man who believed that paying the mortgage was the extent of his emotional labor, but his silence was a signature of approval on everything my mother did. If Mom gave Sienna the last slice of pie, Dad looked at his newspaper. If Mom spent the grocery budget on a new dress for Sienna, while I wore hand-me-downs that were fraying at the hem, Dad changed the channel on the television. His passivity was not neutrality. In a house where favoritism is a fire, the one who watches it burn without picking up a bucket of water is an arsonist too. The dynamic was most painful when we had guests. Hosting was my mother's favorite performance art. She would invite the neighbors or the other church ladies over for tea and pastries. As soon as the doorbell rang, the roles were assigned. Sienna was the star. I was the stagehand. "Sienna, come show Mrs. Gable your dance routine," Mom would chirp, her voice climbing an octave. "Sienna, come sit here and tell everyone about your play date." And Sienna, basking in the glow, would twirl and giggle, absorbing the adoration like a sponge. She was charming. I will give her that. She learned early that being cute was a survival skill, and she mastered it. Meanwhile, I would be in the kitchen. I can still feel the lukewarm water and the slick texture of lemon dish soap on my hands, while laughter erupted from the living room, hitting the walls and echoing back to me. I was scrubbing teaspoons and saucer plates. I remember staring out the window at the gray Montana sky, watching the pine trees sway, and wondering if I had been adopted, or if there was some secret defect in me that made me unlovable. I was not being punished. I was simply being utilized. Someone had to wash the cups so the performance could continue. That someone was always me. Birthdays were the annual audit of our worth. Sienna's birthdays were festivals. For her 10th birthday, Mom hired a pony, a living, breathing pony, stood in our backyard. There were 3 tiers of cake, a magician, and customized gift bags for every child in her class. It cost hundreds of dollars, maybe even 1,000, though money was supposedly tight that year. My birthdays were quieter affairs. I remember my 12th birthday vividly. There was no party, no magician, certainly no pony. Mom had been too busy planning a charity gala to bake, so when the evening came, she opened the fridge and pulled out a plastic container. Inside was a single vanilla cupcake, left over from a bake sale 2 days prior. The frosting was hard and slightly cracked, clinging to the plastic lid. She stuck a single candle in it, lit it with a match, and she and Dad sang a rushed version of the birthday song while the refrigerator hummed in the background. "Make a wish, Chloe," she said, checking her watch. I blew out the candle and wished I was someone else. I ate the stale cake, feeling the dry crumbs stick in my throat, and smiled. I always smiled. I thought if I was grateful enough for the scraps, maybe one day they would invite me to the banquet. But the moment that truly calcified my understanding of my place in the world happened when I was 16. It was a Tuesday evening, and Mom had 2 friends over, women with sharp eyes and expensive handbags. I was doing my homework at the kitchen island, trying to make myself as small as possible, while simultaneously keeping an eye on the oven where a roast was cooking. Another chore assigned to me. Sienna, then 12, breezed into the room. She had just started experimenting with makeup and had done her hair in loose curls. She looked radiant, full of that effortless confidence that comes from never having been told no. "Oh, look at her," one of the women cooed, clutching her chest. "Lillian, she is absolutely stunning. She could be a model. You must be so proud." Mom beamed, physically puffing up with pride. She reached out and smoothed Sienna's hair, a gesture of tenderness she rarely wasted on me. "She really is," Mom said. "She's the beauty of the family, a true gem." Then, the woman's eyes drifted over to me. I was wearing an oversized sweatshirt, my hair pulled back in a messy bun, surrounded by textbooks on organic chemistry and biology. I froze. I knew what was coming. I waited for a compliment, however small. Maybe about my work ethic, maybe about my eyes. Mom glanced at me, her expression flattening. She didn't look at me with malice, which almost would have been better. She looked at me with practicality. "Well," Mom said, her voice dropping to a matter-of-fact tone, "Sienna got the looks, but Chloe has the brains. It is all about balance. You know, God doesn't give with both hands." The women laughed politely. "That's good," one said. "At least she'll have a career." I stood up and walked to the sink to start washing the prep bowls, turning my back to them so they wouldn't see my face. I turned the faucet on, but I didn't put my hands in the water immediately. I just gripped the edge of the cold porcelain sink. At least. The phrase echoed in my head. At least she'll have a career. In that moment, stripped down to the bone, I understood the transaction. I was not the daughter they loved. I was the daughter they could use. Sienna existed to be admired, to bring social capital to the family through her beauty and charm. I existed to provide utility. My intelligence wasn't a point of pride. It was a consolation prize. It was the functional engine in a car nobody cared to paint. I looked down at the soapy water swirling down the drain. A heavy, dark realization settled in my chest, a weight I would carry for the next 12 years. I realized that if I wanted their attention, I would never get it by just existing. I would have to earn it. I would have to be successful enough, rich enough, and generous enough to buy my way onto their radar. I decided right then, staring at the bubbles popping in the sink, that I would become a doctor. I would be so successful that they would have to look at me with the same awe they reserved for Sienna. I would fix their problems, pay their bills, and be the pillar they couldn't stand without. I didn't know then that it was a trap. I didn't know that love isn't a vending machine where you put in achievement and get out affection. I thought I was building a ladder to their hearts. In reality, I was paving a one-way street where I would send everything I had, my money, my energy, my soul, and nothing would ever come back. The water in the sink grew cold, but I kept scrubbing away at stains that weren't there, while behind me, my mother poured another glass of wine for her golden child. Westbridge Institute was 400 miles away from the suffocating beige walls of my childhood home, but the distance did nothing to sever the invisible umbilical cord of financial expectation that my family had wrapped around my throat. I had enrolled in the Doctor of Physical Medicine program, a grueling marathon of anatomy, physiology, and clinical rotations that was designed to break anyone who did not possess an iron will. I possessed the will, but my family seemed determined to test its breaking point. While my peers spent their evenings studying in the quiet, climate-controlled library or decompressing at local bars with craft beers, I was running a gauntlet of 3 different jobs just to keep my tuition paid and my family's lifestyle afloat. My schedule was a mathematical impossibility that I somehow forced into existence every single week. My day began at 4 in the morning as a research assistant in the university pathology lab. For 4 hours, before my own classes even began, I processed tissue samples and stared into microscopes, cataloging cellular decay while the smell of formaldehyde clung to my hair and skin like a second perfume. It paid slightly above minimum wage, but it offered tuition credits that I desperately needed. My second job was purely digital, in the gaps between lectures and during lunch breaks where I usually forgot to eat. I logged into an online tutoring portal. I taught organic chemistry and advanced biology to panicked undergraduates who had parents willing to pay $50 an hour for me to explain the Krebs cycle. I learned to eat protein bars with one hand while typing chemical equations with the other, forcing a polite smile at a webcam while my stomach growled in protest. But the real killer was the third job, 3 nights a week, from 7 in the evening until 3 in the morning. I worked as a night aide at the Willows, a geriatric care facility on the edge of the city. I was not a doctor there. I was the person who changed adult diapers, turned heavy patients to prevent bed sores, and cleaned up vomit when the stomach flu swept through the ward. It was backbreaking, soul-crushing physical labor. My hands, which were learning to perform delicate nerve conduction studies by day, were raw and chapped from industrial sanitizer and bleach by night. I did not sleep more than 4 hours a night for 4 years. I lived in a state of permanent, vibrating exhaustion. My eyes were perpetually rimmed with dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide, and I lost 10 pounds in my first semester simply because I could not afford to buy fresh produce and did not have the time to cook it. None of this would have mattered if I was keeping the money, if I had been saving for a better apartment or a reliable car. The fatigue might have felt like an investment. Instead, I was acting as a human ATM for the Cruz household back in Redwood Hollow. The requests did not come with questions about my life. They came as demands masked as casual updates. It started small. My mother would text me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in the middle of a cadaver dissection. "Electric bill is higher this month. The heater is acting up. Can you cover $200?" I would strip off my gloves, step into the hallway, and transfer the money. $200 meant I had to pick up an extra tutoring shift on Sunday morning. But I did it. I told myself it was helping. I was the responsible one. Then the requests grew larger and more frequent. "The roof over the garage is leaking." My father texted me during my second year. "It is going to cost $1,200 to fix. We are a little short right now." $1,200 was my entire savings for the semester's textbooks. I called him, panic rising in my throat. "Dad, I really need that for books," I said, leaning against the nurse's station at the Willows, my legs throbbing from a 6-hour round of checking vitals. "Can't you put it on a credit card?" "We are maxed out, Chloe," he replied, his voice rough with irritation, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Besides, you are in medical school. You are practically a doctor. You have access to all those loans and grants. It is just money. Do you want the roof to collapse on my car?" The logic was baffling. To them, medical school was synonymous with wealth, regardless of the fact that I was a student accumulating 6 figures of debt. They believed I had tapped into a secret reservoir of gold simply by putting on a white coat. They never asked where the money came from. They never asked how many bedpans I had to empty to earn $1,200. I sent the money. I photocopied my textbooks from a classmate instead of buying my own. The worst, however, were the expenses for Sienna. Sienna was in her early 20s, drifting between finding herself and working part-time jobs that she quit whenever her boss asked her to actually work. Yet, she always seemed to have needs that were classified as emergencies. "Sienna needs to see a specialist for her skin." Mom texted, It is not covered by insurance. $300. Sienna's car broke down. She needs a new alternator. $450. One particularly brutal month, during my clinical rotations, I received a text from my father. Sienna has been really down lately. She is depressed. She needs a change of scenery. She wants to go to a wellness retreat in Arizona with her friends. It is important for her mental health. I stared at the phone. I was standing in a hospital corridor. Having been awake for 28 hours straight, I was eating a pack of peanut butter crackers from a vending machine because it was the only dinner I could afford. My own mental health was fraying at the edges. I cried in the shower at least twice a week from sheer burnout, and they wanted me to fund a vacation for Sienna because she was feeling sad. "Dad, I can't," I typed back, my fingers trembling. "I literally do not have it." His response came 5 minutes later. "You have always been the strong one. Chloe, Sienna is fragile. You know that. Help your sister this one time. Don't be selfish. You are going to be making a fortune soon anyway." Selfish. The word cut through me like a scalpel. I was working 3 jobs, destroying my body and sacrificing my youth, and I was the selfish one because I hesitated to pay for a spa trip. But the conditioning was too deep. The need to be useful, to be the good one, overrode my anger. I picked up 3 extra shifts at the nursing home that month. I didn't sleep on Saturday or Sunday. I transferred $600 to Sienna's account. She didn't even text to say thank you. Instead, I saw photos on Facebook of her by a pool in Scottsdale, holding a margarita, with the caption, "Self-care season." My mother commented, "You deserve it, baby. Enjoy." I lay in my narrow twin bed that night, listening to the sirens of the city outside, and felt a hollowness in my chest that no amount of anatomy knowledge could explain. Why did I do it? Why did I keep feeding the beast that bit me? I told myself it was an investment. I told myself that this was the price of admission to the family. I convinced myself that they were just stressed, that they didn't understand the pressure I was under because they had never done it. I held on to one singular glowing hope: graduation. Graduation would be the finish line. When I finally walked across that stage, when they saw me in the doctoral hood, when the title doctor was officially in front of my name, the dynamic would shift. They would see the magnitude of what I had achieved. They would realize that I wasn't just a bank account. I was a person who had conquered a mountain. They would look at me with the same shiny, adoration-filled eyes they used for Sienna. "Just get to the finish line," I whispered to the empty room. "Just get them there. Fly them out. Show them." I truly believed that the degree would be the magic wand that turned their indifference into love. I thought that if I could just perform this one last, great miracle, paying $14,000 to bring them all to my ceremony in luxury, treating them like royalty, they would finally crown me as a daughter worth keeping. I did not know then that you cannot buy what was never for sale. I did not know that to them. My graduation was not a celebration of my achievement. It was just another opportunity for them to see what else they could take. The confirmation screen on my laptop blinked, a sterile blue light in the darkness of my apartment, displaying a number that made my stomach drop through the floorboards. $14,240. I sat there for a long time, my finger hovering over the trackpad, just staring at the total. That sum represented every extra overnight shift I had worked at the Willows for the past 2 years. It was the quantification of every bedpan I had emptied, every holidays I had missed, and every meal I had skipped to save a few dollars. It was a down payment on a house. It was a new car. It was freedom. But I was not buying freedom. I was buying attendance. I had purchased 4 round-trip, business-class tickets from Montana to the city where Westbridge Institute was located. I had booked them into the finest boutique hotel near the campus, a place with Egyptian cotton sheets and a concierge who knew how to get reservations at impossible restaurants. I wanted to remove every single friction point. I wanted to eliminate every excuse. There would be no "money is tight," no "my back hurts from the coach seats," no "the hotel bed was lumpy." I was curating a flawless experience for the Cruz family. A red carpet rolled out across state lines, leading them directly to the seat where they would finally watch me become Dr. Chloe Cruz. I took a deep breath, the kind that rattles in your chest, and clicked confirm. The transaction went through. My savings account, which I had painstakingly built up from zero, was decimated in a single second. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a desperate, manic hope. This had to work. It was too expensive not to work. I called home the next evening to tell them. I had rehearsed this moment in the shower, imagining their gasps of delight, the tears in my mother's voice, the rare nod of approval from my father. I imagined Sienna finally looking at me with envy instead of pity. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have a surprise. I know you guys were worried about the travel costs for graduation next month, so I took care of it. I booked flights for everyone." There was a pause on the line. I heard the television blaring in the background, the familiar sound of a game show host shouting. "Oh," my mother said, "that is nice of you. Chloe, what airline is it? You know your father hates the budget ones. There is no legroom." "It is not a budget airline, Mom," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "It is first class. Well, business class. But they have the lie-flat seats. I paid for the upgrade so you guys could sleep on the way over. And I got you rooms at the Chatsworth Hotel." I waited for the thank you. I waited for the wow. "The Chatsworth?" Mom asked, her tone skeptical. "Is that the one near the park? I heard the traffic is terrible over there. And honestly, Chloe, sitting on a plane for 4 hours is going to be hell on my sciatica. Even with a flat seat, I have been having such flare-ups lately. You have no idea how much pain I am in." My heart stuttered. I had just spent $14,000, and her first instinct was to complain about traffic and her back. "It will be comfortable, Mom," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "I promise, it is the best hotel in the city." "I guess," she sighed. "Let me put your father on." I heard the phone fumble, and then Douglas Cruz's gruff voice came on the line. "Chloe," he said, "your mother says you booked flights. What dates?" I gave him the dates. "That is a Wednesday," he grumbled. "I am going to have to close the shop early. You know Wednesdays are busy." "It is my graduation, Dad," I said, my voice shrinking. "It is a doctorate. It is a once-in-a-lifetime thing." I know, he said, dismissive. "I am just saying, the timing is inconvenient, but if you already paid for it, I guess we have to go. We cannot waste the money." That was it. No pride, just an obligation not to waste money. Then, there was a scuffling sound, and Sienna's voice chirped through the speaker. "Chloe, oh my God, business class? Do they serve that really good champagne? The one the Kardashians drink?" "I think so, Sienna," I said, finally feeling a tiny spark of connection. At least she was excited about the luxury. "Okay, cool," she said. "Hey, listen, I need to ask you something. I started seeing this guy, Kyle. He is a DJ, and he is totally amazing. Can he come? Like, if we share the room, it wouldn't cost extra for the hotel, right? You would just need to get him a ticket." I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cool glass of my apartment window. "Sienna," I said slowly, "I bought 4 tickets, one for Mom, one for Dad, one for you, and one for Nana. There is no ticket for Kyle. I do not even know Kyle." "You would love him," she insisted, her voice taking on that whining edge she used when she wanted something. "He is so funny, and I do not want to be third-wheeling with Mom and Dad the whole time. Come on, Chloe. You are obviously loaded if you bought these tickets. What is one more?" "I am not loaded," I snapped, my patience finally fraying. "I worked 3 jobs for this, Sienna, and no, Kyle cannot come. This is a family event." "Fine," she huffed. "You do not have to be such a bitch about it. I was just asking." The line went dead. I stood in my empty apartment, the silence ringing in my ears. I had spent $14,000, and I had been called a bitch, a burden, and an inconvenience. But I did not cancel the tickets. I did not scream. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I doubled down. I convinced myself that their reaction was just stress. They were small-town people. They were intimidated by the travel. Once they got here, once they saw the life I had built, once they saw me on that stage, it would be different. I decided to make the invitation physical, something they could hold, something that would force them to understand the gravity of the event. I went to a specialty stationery store downtown. I selected thick, cream-colored cardstock with a heavy linen texture. I printed their itineraries in elegant, gold-embossed font. I bought envelopes lined with silk and sealed them with wax. I spent 3 hours assembling them on my kitchen table. I handled each envelope like it was a holy relic. I was not just sending plane tickets. I was sending a plea. Look at me. Value me. Please. I mailed them via overnight courier. When they arrived, my mother sent a text. Got the package. Fancy paper. Seems like a waste of trees. But okay. See you soon. I ignored the sting. I focused on the logistics. I called Aspen and Oak, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place with a 3-month waiting list and a menu that did not list prices. I begged the maitre d', leveraging the fact that I had treated his aunt in the clinic a few months prior. I can get you the private alcove, he had said, but we require a deposit. Put it on the card, I said without hesitation. I pre-ordered the tasting menu. I selected the wine pairings. I paid for the entire dinner in advance, including a 20% gratuity, ensuring that when the night came, no bill would ever hit the table. My father would not have the chance to grimace at the prices. My mother would not have the chance to critique the cost of the appetizers. It would just be a magical, flowing evening of celebration. The night before graduation, my apartment was spotless. My cap and gown hung on the back of the bedroom door. The heavy velvet of the doctoral hood draped carefully so it would not wrinkle. The colors of the hood represented medicine, a deep, rich green. I sat on my couch, holding my phone. I checked the airline app. The flight was scheduled to depart Montana at 8 in the morning the next day. 4 seats occupied in row 2. I looked at the 3 empty envelopes left over from my stationery project. I traced the gold lettering with my thumb. They are coming, I whispered to the empty room. They have to come. I had done everything right. I had paid the toll. I had cleared the path. I had bought the best seats, the best food, the best hotel. I had removed every single obstacle that could possibly prevent them from loving me for just one day. I imagined the moment I would walk off the stage. I imagined Dad shaking my hand, his grip firm and proud. I imagined Mom hugging me, actually hugging me, not the air kiss she usually gave. I imagined Sienna posting a picture of us, captioning it, "So proud of my big sister." It felt so real I could almost taste the champagne. I went to bed early, clutching that hope to my chest like a shield. I did not know that while I was dreaming of acceptance, my family was already packing their bags, but they were not packing for the weather in the city where I lived. They were packing swimsuits, sunscreen, and linen shirts. They had cashed in the tickets. The airline I had chosen, the expensive one with the lie-flat seats, had a very flexible cancellation policy. The credit went back to the passengers named on the tickets, not the purchaser. I had given them $14,000 of travel credit, and I had given them the freedom to use it however they pleased. I slept soundly, unaware that the notification flashing on my phone screen, a flight update alert, was not telling me they had checked in, but that their itinerary had been changed to a destination 4,000 miles away. The auditorium was a cavern of gold light and velvet noise. 3,000 people were packed into the West Bridge Grand Hall, a sea of black gowns and square mortarboards shifting like a dark tide. The air smelled of expensive perfume, stale coffee, and the electric hum of anticipation. Every time the heavy double doors at the back of the room opened, heads turned. My head turned. I was sitting in the 3rd row of the graduating class, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned white. I was not listening to the keynote speaker, a Nobel laureate who was droning on about the future of healthcare. I was entirely focused on row G, seats 4, 5, 6, and 7. I had arranged for those seats to be marked. I had called the registrar's office 3 times to ensure the little white placards were taped to the armrests, reserved for the family of Dr. Cruz. From my angle, I could only see the backs of the chairs. I could see the shoulders of the people sitting in the rows in front of them and behind them, but there was a gap in the line of sight where my family should have been. A void. They are late, I told myself. My internal voice was frantic. A bird trapped in a glass room. The flight was delayed. The traffic from the airport is a nightmare. Dad probably took a wrong turn. They are parking the rental car right now. They are running through the lobby. I checked my watch. The ceremony had started 45 minutes ago. Candidates for the degree of Doctor of Physical Medicine, the dean announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Please rise. The rustle of synthetic fabric filled the room as 200 of us stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead shot. We began the slow shuffle toward the stairs on the left side of the stage. This was it. This was the moment I had worked toward while scrubbing floors at the nursing home at 2 a.m. This was the moment I had bought with $14,000 and 4 years of sleep deprivation. I stepped onto the platform. The lights were blindingly hot. I could feel sweat trickling down my spine under the heavy gown. Chloe Marie Cruz, the announcer read. I walked. I forced my face into a smile that felt like a mask made of cracked porcelain. I reached the center of the stage. The dean extended his hand. I shook it. He handed me the diploma cover, a smooth leather binder that proved I was somebody. And then, as is tradition, I looked out into the audience. The lights were rigged to illuminate the graduates, keeping the crowd in shadow, but the first 10 rows were visible. I found row G. I found the center aisle. I counted 4 seats in. They were empty. They were not just empty. They were violently empty. There were no coats draped over the backrests, no handbags tucked underneath, no crumpled programs left on the cushions. There were just the stark, white, reserved signs taped to the red velvet, staring back at me like accusations. To the left of the empty block, a large family was cheering for someone else, holding up a glittery sign. To the right, an older couple was wiping tears from their eyes. In the middle, in the space that belonged to me, there was nothing but air. I stumbled slightly as I walked off the stage. A volunteer caught my elbow. Steady, doctor, she whispered. I walked back to my seat, the applause for the next student ringing in my ears like static. I sat down. I did not look at the stage again. I stared at my shoes. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, starting at my heart and moving outward to my fingertips. Maybe there was an accident. The desperate part of my brain whispered. Maybe the plane crashed. Maybe they are in a hospital. It was a sick thought, but it was preferable to the alternative. If they were hurt, it meant they wanted to be here. If they were hurt, I was still loved. The ceremony ended 2 hours later. The doors were thrown open, and the graduates spilled out into the courtyard where the spring sun was shining aggressively bright. It was a chaotic, joyous mess of balloons, bouquets of roses, and fathers hugging sons. I stood by a stone pillar near the exit, clutching my diploma cover. I was the only person standing alone. I pulled my phone out of the hidden pocket of my gown. I had turned it off for the ceremony. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it once before I managed to power it on. I waited for the flood of texts. So sorry we missed it. Stuck in traffic. We are running to find you. The screen lit up. No texts, no missed calls, no voicemails. There was, however, a notification from Instagram. It was not a direct message. It was a tag. Sienna had tagged me in a photo. My thumb hovered over the icon. A feeling of absolute dread washed over me, a physical nausea that tasted like bile. I tapped the screen. The image loaded in high resolution. It was not a picture of a traffic jam. It was not a picture of an airport terminal. It was blue, the deepest, most vibrant electric blue of the Aegean Sea. In the foreground, there was a white stone terrace bathed in golden sunlight. A table was set with a spread of seafood, olives, and 4 large crystal glasses filled with white wine. And there they were. My father, Douglas, was wearing a linen shirt, unbuttoned at the top, holding a cigar. He looked relaxed, a look I had never seen on him in my presence. My mother, Lillian, was wearing an oversized sun hat and huge sunglasses, laughing at something off camera. She looked young. She looked burden-free. Sienna was in the center, wearing a white bikini top and a sarong, holding her wine glass up to the sunlight. She looked radiant. And next to her, in the spot that should have been mine, or perhaps simply a spot paid for by my money, was a young man with bleached hair and tattoos on his arm. Kyle, the DJ. The caption beneath the photo read, "Finally some peace, the family trip we deserved. Mykonos blessed living, our best life." I stared at the photo. I zoomed in on the timestamp. Posted 45 minutes ago, exactly when I was walking across the stage. They were not in Montana. They were not in the city. They were in Greece. They had taken the airline credit, the $14,000 I had slaved for, the money that represented my blood and sweat, and they had used it to fly to Europe. They had refunded my meticulously planned graduation trip and turned it into a vacation for themselves and a stranger. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a physical blow, harder than any slap. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They had stolen it. They had liquidated my achievement and drank it in the form of expensive wine on a Greek island. I scrolled down to the comments. I couldn't stop myself. A friend of Sienna's had commented, "Wait, isn't your sister graduating today? I thought you guys were going to that." And there, right below it, was the reply from Sienna's account. It had been liked by my mother. "Lol, yeah. But it is just a ceremony. Boring. Besides, she is not even a real doctor. It is just physical medicine. Whatever that means. Pass the ouzo." Not even a real doctor. The words burned into my retinas. I looked up from the phone. The courtyard was filled with laughter. A father near me was holding his daughter's face in his hands, crying. "I am so proud of you," he was saying. "You did it, sweetheart. You really did it." I stood there, surrounded by love that belonged to other people, holding a device that beamed hate from 4,000 miles away. The denial that had sustained me for 28 years shattered. It didn't crack. It disintegrated. The belief that if I just worked harder, if I just paid more, if I just achieved more, they would love me. It was gone. It turned to dust in the wind. They did not care. They had never cared. I was not a daughter to them. I was a resource. I was a bank account with a heartbeat. I was the mule they whipped to plow the fields so they could eat the harvest. I looked at the empty, reserved seats in my mind. I looked at the photo of them toasting to their own happiness on my dime. A strange, cold calm settled over me. It was not sadness. Sadness is hot. Sadness is messy. This was ice. This was the absolute zero of emotional detachment. I took a screenshot of the post. I took a screenshot of the comment. I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at the diploma in my hand. Doctor of Physical Medicine. Sienna was wrong. I was a doctor. And doctors know that when a limb is gangrenous, when the rot has reached the bone and is poisoning the blood, you do not put a bandage on it. You do not wish it better. You cut it off. I turned around and walked away from the celebration. I did not go to the reception. I did not go to the dinner I had paid for at Aspen and Oak. I walked straight to the street, hailed a cab, and gave the driver my address. "You okay, miss?" the driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I was still wearing my cap and gown. I looked at him, my eyes dry and clear. "I have never been better," I said. "I just lost a lot of dead weight." As the taxi pulled away, I didn't look back at the university. I looked forward, into the silence of my apartment, where a laptop full of receipts and a lawyer's phone number were waiting for me. The graduation was over. The operation was about to begin. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a high-definition view of the wreckage. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee untouched beside my laptop. My apartment was silent, but my head was loud with the noise of shattering illusions. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Graduation. Inside were the professional photos that had been emailed to me at dawn by the university's photography service. They were efficient. high-quality images designed to capture the pinnacle of academic achievement. I clicked on the first one. There I was, frozen in time. I was standing on the stage, the dean's hand shaking mine, the velvet hood of my doctorate draped over my shoulders. My smile was there, plastered on, tight and practiced. But the camera, with its cruel, unblinking lens, had captured the background with perfect focus. Behind me, in the blurred wash of the audience, the gap was undeniable. The 4 empty seats in row G looked like missing teeth in a perfect smile. They were dark voids in a sea of celebrating families. I zoomed in until the pixels began to distort. I could almost see the outline of the reserved signs I had fought so hard to secure. I looked lonely. I did not look like a victor. I looked like a survivor of a shipwreck standing on a deserted shore. My phone buzzed against the table surface, the vibration startling me. It was a text message from the group chat named Cruise Family. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the glass. "So sorry we could not make it. Honey," the text from my mother read, "something came up last minute. Emergency. We are heartbroken. Love you." There was no explanation of what the emergency was. There was no apology for the wasted $14,000. There was no mention of Mykonos, just a vague, lazy lie wrapped in a platitude. Something came up, as if a trip to a Greek island involving passports and international flights was something that just happened to you, like catching a cold. I did not reply. The time for arguing was over. The time for evidence gathering had begun. I opened a new window on my laptop. I logged into my online banking portal. Then, I opened a second window and logged into a secondary Instagram account I had created years ago, one they did not know about, which allowed me to see their posts even if they tried to hide things from me. I pulled up my spreadsheet, the one where I tracked my budget. I had always been meticulous about money. I had to be. Every dollar I sent them was a dollar I had to bleed for. I started with the search term, transfer to mom. The list populated, a long, scrolling column of red numbers. Hundreds of dollars here, thousands there, a river of currency flowing one way. I scrolled back to last October. I remembered that month vividly. It was the month the heating system in my apartment building had broken down for 3 days. I had slept in a parka and 2 pairs of socks. On October 14th, I had wired $350 to my father. The text from Dad. "The heater in the house died. Mom is freezing. We need a part, but we are short until payday. Can you help?" I looked at the date, October 14th. I switched to the Instagram tab. I scrolled through Sienna's feed, October 14th. There it was, a photo of Sienna and my mother in plush white robes, holding cups of cucumber water. The location tag was the Serenity Springs Spa and Resort. The caption read, "Mommy and Me Day. Hot stone massages and facials. We needed this so bad." I checked the spa's website. The mother-daughter rejuvenation package cost exactly $350. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I had sent money so my mother wouldn't freeze, and she had used it to get a hot stone massage while I shivered in my apartment. I kept scrolling. February. I remembered February because I had a cavity that needed filling, but I had put it off because I didn't have the copay. My tooth had throbbed every time I drank cold water. On February 3rd, I had sent $500 to Sienna. The text from Sienna. "Chloe, please, I am crying right now. I have a dental emergency. My wisdom tooth is impacted. It hurts so much. Dad says they don't have the cash. Please." I had sent it immediately. I knew that pain. I couldn't let my sister suffer. I found the date on her timeline, February 3rd. There was no picture of a dentist's chair, no swollen cheeks. Instead, there was a video. It was night. Bonfires were burning on a beach. The location was a beach town in Mexico. Sienna was dancing holding a bottle of tequila, her mouth wide open in a scream of laughter, showing a perfect, pain-free set of teeth. Caption: "Spring break starts early. Cabo with the girls." She wasn't in pain. She was partying. My dental money, the money I had saved by ignoring my own rotting tooth, had paid for tequila shots and a plane ticket to Mexico. I felt sick, not the nausea of shock, but the deep, churning nausea of realization. This wasn't just selfishness, this was fraud. They were inventing crises that mirrored my own empathy just to extract cash from me. I went further back, last summer. Transfer: $800 to Douglas Cruz. Reason: the transmission on the truck is shot. I can't get to work without it. I'm going to lose my job. Chloe? I checked my mother's Facebook for that week. July 12th. A photo of my mother's hand resting on the steering wheel of the truck that was supposedly broken. On her wrist glinted a diamond tennis bracelet. Caption: Doug surprised me for our anniversary. He spoils me so much. 30 years of love. I looked up the brand of the bracelet. It was a mid-range jewelry store mall brand. The sale price for a 1-carat tennis bracelet was exactly $799. He hadn't fixed the truck. The truck was never broken. He had taken my money, the money I sent to save his job, and used it to buy my mother a gift to make himself look like a good husband. I was not the daughter. I was the financier of their illusions. I sat back, my hands trembling slightly. It was a systematic dismantling of my trust. Every time I had felt a pang of guilt, every time I had sacrificed, they had been laughing. I closed the browser tabs. I needed to stop looking. But there was one more thing, a file on my desktop named voicemails. I usually deleted voicemails, but I had saved a few from the family over the years, mostly short ones. Happy birthday, or call us back. I kept them for the days when I felt lonely, to remind myself I had people. There was one file from Christmas 2 years ago. I had been working the holiday shift at the hospital and couldn't answer the phone. The file was 4 minutes long. I remembered listening to the first 30 seconds, my dad saying, "Merry Christmas. Chloe, sorry you are working. We miss you." And then I had stopped listening because a patient had coded. I had never gone back to finish it. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I clicked play. "Merry Christmas. Chloe, sorry you are working. We miss you," my dad's voice said, sounding stiff and rehearsed. "Anyway, call us when you can." Then, the sound of the phone being lowered, a rustling noise. He hadn't hung up. He must have set the phone down on the table, thinking the call was ended. The audio quality changed, becoming distant and echoey, capturing the ambient noise of the living room. "Did you do it?" That was my mother's voice. "Yeah, I left the message," Dad said. His voice was different now, relaxed, deeper. "Think she will send the Christmas bonus?" "She better," Sienna's voice chimed in. "I saw on Google that residents get a stipend in December. She definitely has it." "She is so tight with money, though," Mom complained, always acting like a martyr. "Oh, I work so hard. I am so tired. God, it is exhausting listening to her." I gripped the edge of the table. My breath hitched. "She is an investment, Lil," Dad said, the sound of ice clinking against glass. "You plant the seeds. You wait for the harvest. We put up with her gloomy attitude for 18 years. Now is the payout. She is so desperate for us to like her. It is actually sad." Sienna laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "I told her I loved her shirt the other day and she practically cried. She is so pathetic." "Careful," Dad warned. "Don't push her too hard or she will snap. We need to keep her thinking she is the favorite for a few more years, at least until the house is paid off. She is our retirement plan, remember?" I know, Sienna said. "But she is not even a real doctor yet. It is all just book stuff. She thinks she is so smart." "She is smart enough to sign checks," Mom said. "That is all that matters. Pass the wine." The recording fuzzes out for another minute of clinking silverware and laughter that was at my expense. Then, finally, the line clicked dead. I took the headphones off. The silence in the room was absolute. I didn't cry. The tears I had shed for years, the tears of guilt, of longing, of feeling inadequate, they evaporated instantly. They had called me an investment, a retirement plan, pathetic. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew I was desperate for their love, and they had weaponized that desperation. They had built an entire economy around my insecurity. Every "I love you" was a transaction fee. Every "we miss you" was a bill collecting notice. I looked at the screen. The date of the recording was 2 years ago. For 2 whole years since then, I had continued to bleed for them. I had paid for the graduation trip. I had bought the plane tickets. I felt a shift in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking. I was no longer Chloe the daughter, the sister, the frantic medical student trying to please her parents. That person died the moment the audio file ended. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The world looked different now. It looked sharper. I went back to the computer. I created a new folder. I named it Evidence. I dragged the bank statements into it. I dragged the screenshots of the spa day, the Cabo trip, the diamond bracelet into it. I dragged the audio file into it. Then, I picked up my phone. I searched for a contact I had saved during a networking event at the hospital. Harper Linwood. She was a contract lawyer known for being ruthless with asset recovery and fraud. I typed a message. Ms. Linwood, my name is Dr. Cruz. I have a case of familial financial fraud and misappropriation of funds involving roughly 6 figures over the last 4 years. I have bank records, social media corroboration, and audio confessions. I would like to retain your services to sever all financial ties and recover what is owed. When can we meet? I hit send. I looked at the photo of the empty chairs one last time. Then, I hit the delete key. The investigation was over. The sentencing phase was about to begin. I created a new master directory on my hard drive and named it Factual Corrections. It was a sterile name for a nuclear option, but accuracy was the only thing I cared about now. I was done with narratives. I was done with stories about family loyalty and difficult childhoods. I was interested only in data. I dragged the folder labeled Evidence inside it. Then, I began the process of digitizing the fallout. My phone had been vibrating incessantly for the past 48 hours. I had not answered a single call. Instead, I let every ring cycle through to voicemail. I watched the notifications stack up on my lock screen like layers of sediment. I sat at my desk, a notepad on my left and my laptop on the right, and began to process the audio. I clicked on the first voicemail. It was from my mother. Timestamped 2 hours after the ceremony ended. Chloe, honey, call us back. Her voice was breathless, feigning a panic that didn't quite reach her eyes in the photos I had seen. We tried to call the school, but nobody answered. We are so worried. Just let us know you are safe. I typed into my spreadsheet, Exhibit A, feigned ignorance, time 2:00 p.m. I clicked the next one, Douglas Cruz, 4 hours later. Chloe, stop playing games. Your mother is upset. We are having trouble with the credit card at the hotel. It is declining. I need you to call the bank and authorize the charge. It is embarrassing standing here in the lobby. Call me immediately. I paused the track. The credit card. Of course, the card they were using in Mykonos was a supplementary card attached to my primary account. I had given it to them for emergencies 3 years ago. They were currently trying to charge a 5-star Greek resort to my credit line. I typed, Exhibit B, attempted unauthorized use of funds. Time, 6:00 p.m. The tone of the messages shifted as the hours passed, and the silence from my end stretched into a full day. The worry evaporated, replaced by the raw, ugly entitlement I had heard in that secret recording. Sienna, 12 hours later. You are being such a brat. Chloe, seriously? You ghost us on your graduation day just to make a scene? We are trying to enjoy a family vacation, and you are ruining the vibe. Kyle thinks you are psychotic. Put more money on the card. We are stuck at dinner. Douglas, 20 hours later. You are ungrateful. After everything we did to raise you, you think because you have a degree you are better than us? You are nothing without this family. Pick up the phone. I did not feel a spike of adrenaline. I did not feel the urge to cry. I felt the cool, detached satisfaction of a coroner determining a cause of death. The relationship had not died of natural causes. It had been murdered by greed. I saved every file. I did not delete a single second. I backed them up to the cloud and to an external hard drive. Then, I opened a fresh document and began the audit. I titled it, Liabilities and Revocations. I went through my bank statements line by line, tracing the tendrils of my financial life that had wrapped around them. It was worse than I had realized. It wasn't just the big transfers. It was the slow, steady bleed of subscriptions and services I had absorbed over the years to make their lives easier. Item 1. The family cell phone plan. I was paying $340 a month for 4 lines with unlimited data. I was paying for the phones themselves, the latest models that Sienna insisted on having every September. Item 2. Car insurance. I was the primary policyholder for my father's truck and Sienna's convertible. They were listed as drivers, but the premium came out of my checking account every month on the 15th, $210. Item 3. Streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Spotify Family Plan, all logged in on their devices, all billed to me. Item 4. Sienna's apartment. This was the heavy hitter. When Sienna moved to the city near Redwood Hollow to pursue fashion, she had no credit history. I had co-signed the lease. Not only that, but I had set up an automatic transfer to cover half her rent because she claimed her part-time job at the boutique didn't pay enough, $1,200 a month. I looked at the total. It was staggering. I was subsidizing a middle-class lifestyle for 3 adults while I was eating instant oatmeal. I printed the list. I put on a blazer, not because I was going anywhere, but because I needed to feel armored. My phone rang. It was Harper Linwood's office. Dr. Cruz, the receptionist said, Ms. Linwood is ready for you via video conference. The screen flickered, and Harper Linwood appeared. She looked exactly as she had when I met her briefly at a hospital charity gala. Sharp, impeccable, with eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She was sitting in an office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Dr. Cruz, she said. Her voice was calm, low, and devoid of unnecessary pleasantries. I received your email and the preliminary files. I have reviewed the evidence folder. And? I asked. It is substantial, she said. The unauthorized use of funds is clear. The intent to exploit is documented in the audio recording. But we are not here to discuss the morality of your family. We are here to discuss the severance of ties. What is your objective? I want out, I said. Completely. I want to be a ghost to them. I want every single financial tether cut, cauterized, and buried. Today. Harper nodded once. She pulled a file toward her. Let's start with the immediate liabilities, the credit cards. They are authorized users, I said. I want them removed. Done, she said, making a note. I will contact the fraud department of your bank within the hour. We will flag the charges in Mykonos as unauthorized usage beyond the scope of the agreed emergency verbal contract. The bank will lock the cards immediately. They will not be able to buy a pack of gum, let alone a hotel room. Good, I said. Next, Harper said, the lease for Sienna Cruz. I am the guarantor, I said, and I pay half the rent. The lease term. Harper checked a document on her screen. It has 4 months remaining. If you stop paying, you are liable. However, there is a clause here regarding material change in financial circumstances of the guarantor. We can file a notice of withdrawal. It will force the landlord to demand a new guarantor from Sienna within 30 days. If she cannot provide one, which, given her credit score, she cannot, she will be evicted. I thought about Sienna. I thought about her calling me pathetic in that recording. I thought about her laughing in Cabo with my dental money. Do it, I said. File the notice, and stop the automatic transfer for the rent immediately. Harper didn't blink. Understood. The utilities and insurance? Cancel them, I said. Remove my name. If they want electricity, they can open an account. If they want to drive, they can buy their own policy. This will leave them without coverage effectively immediately. Harper noted, "It wasn't a warning, it was a clarification. If they have an accident tomorrow, they are uninsured." "They have been driving on my insurance for 5 years," I said. "They had 5 years to save money. Cancel it." Harper typed rapidly. The sound of her mechanical keyboard was the only noise in the room. "Finally," she said, looking up, "the recovery of assets, the $14,000 for the travel credit. Since the airline refunded it to their names, legally, it is in their possession. However, since you can prove you paid for it with the expectation of a specific service, their attendance at graduation, which they failed to provide, we can sue for unjust enrichment and breach of verbal contract. We can also attach a lien to any assets they do have." "They don't have assets," I said. "They have my money." "Then we will garnish," Harper said simply. "We will send a demand letter for the full amount, plus the cumulative total of the loans you provided under false pretenses, the heater, the medical bills, the car repairs. We will frame it as fraud. We will threaten criminal charges for theft by deception regarding the specific instances where you have proof they used the money for luxury goods. That tends to motivate people to settle." "Draft the letter," I said. Harper looked at me. For a second, her professional mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of genuine respect. "This is going to be a shock to the system for them," she said. "When we execute this, everything stops at once. The cards, the phones, the rent, the insurance. They are currently in a foreign country. They will be stranded." "They are resourceful," I said, my voice steady. "They managed to rebook a 4-person itinerary to Greece behind my back. I am sure they can figure out how to get to an embassy." "Very well," Harper said. "I am sending you the authorization forms now via secure e-signature. Once you sign these, I become your legal proxy. They cannot contact you. If they try, you direct them to me. You do not speak to them. You do not answer the door. You disappear." A notification popped up on my screen. DocuSign. Power of Attorney and Asset Revocation Authorization. I opened the document. It was 12 pages of dense legal text. I scrolled to the bottom. I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake. I wasn't signing away my family. I was signing a peace treaty with myself. I was signing a Declaration of Independence. I clicked sign. I watched the progress bar turn green. Completed. "It is done," Harper said. "I will begin the calls now. By the time they wake up in Mykonos tomorrow morning, their world will be significantly smaller." "Thank you, Harper," I said. "One last thing," she said before ending the call. "Do not look at the fallout. Dr. Cruz, don't check their social media. Don't listen to the voicemails that are about to come in. You have launched the missile. You do not need to watch the explosion." "I know," I said. "I am not doing this to hurt them. I am doing this to balance the books." "Justice usually feels like injury to the person losing the privilege," Harper said. "Good afternoon." The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my apartment. I felt lighter, physically lighter. It was as if I had been carrying a backpack full of stones up a mountain for 28 years, and I had finally just shrugged it off and let it tumble down the slope. I walked over to my fridge. There was a picture held up by a magnet. A photo of me and Sienna when we were kids. I looked at it. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt done. I took the photo down. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. That would have been dramatic. I just opened the trash can and let it drop in, right on top of the coffee grounds. Then, I went to my phone settings. I opened the contact list. Mom, block caller. Dad, block caller. Sienna, block caller. I put the phone down. Let them scream into the void. The bank was closed. The Hazel Room was the kind of establishment where the air conditioning smelled like vanilla and old money, and the silence between tables was purchased at a premium. It was the crown jewel of the downtown dining scene, a place my mother had shared on Facebook a dozen times with captions like, "Dreaming of this" or "One day," but where she had never actually set foot because a single appetizer cost more than her weekly grocery budget. I had rented the private dining suite at the back of the restaurant. It was an intimate, windowless chamber with mahogany walls and a long, polished oak table that looked more like a boardroom fixture than a place to eat dinner. I arrived an hour early. I did not come to eat. I came to set the stage. I placed a portable projector at the head of the table. It was a sleek black device, incongruous amidst the crystal stemware and the silver candelabras. I connected it to my laptop, snaking the HDMI cable under the floral centerpiece so it would not look messy. I tested the throw distance. The beam of light cut through the dim amber atmosphere of the room, hitting the white wall at the far end with perfect clarity. I opened the file. Factual corrections. I checked the sound system. I connected the Bluetooth speaker I had brought, hiding it behind a heavy velvet curtain near the screen. I needed the audio to be surround sound. I needed there to be no escape from the voices that were about to fill the room. Then, I arranged the seating. There were 5 chairs, one for Douglas, one for Lillian, one for Sienna, one for me, positioned right next to the projector controls. And one more. I pulled a heavy high-back chair to the corner of the room, slightly in the shadows, but with a clear line of sight to the table. I angled it precisely. It was a witness chair. It was reserved for the only person in my life who had looked at my work and seen value rather than a price tag. He was not here yet, but he would be. The waiter, a young man with a stiff collar and nervous eyes, poked his head in. "Dr. Cruz?" he asked softly. "Shall I bring the wine list when your guests arrive?" "No," I said, not looking up from my laptop screen. "Water only, tap, and no menus. We will not be ordering." He hesitated, clearly confused by a private booking that involved no food, but the deposit I had paid was non-refundable and substantial. "Very well, ma'am." He closed the door. I was alone. I sat down in my chair, turning it so my back was to the entrance. I watched the dust motes dance in the beam of the projector light. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It was not the frantic fluttering of anxiety I used to feel when I knew I had disappointed them. It was the cold, hydraulic thud of a machine that had been switched to a new operating mode. They were late. Of course they were late. I checked my watch, 7:15. The invitation I had sent, via a courier service, since I had blocked their numbers, stated 7 o'clock sharp. The message had been brief. "Dinner at the Hazel Room. We need to talk about the finances. I have a solution." They would interpret solution as reinstatement. They would think I had cracked. They would think the 2 weeks of frozen bank accounts, canceled leases, and silence were just a tantrum, and that I was now ready to apologize and hand over the credit cards again. At 7:22, the heavy oak door creaked open. The sound of their voices preceded them. It was a chaotic mix of high-pitched complaints and performative laughter. "I am just saying. The valet was incredibly rude," my mother was saying. "He looked at the rental car like it was trash. When Chloe fixes the lease on the truck, we won't have to drive that piece of junk." "Wow," Sienna's voice echoed. "Look at this place. It is totally dark, though. Why is it so moody?" "It is atmospheric, Sienna," my father corrected, his voice booming with that false confidence he wore like a cheap suit. "This is how the 1% eats." I did not turn around. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the laptop keyboard. I heard the scraping of chairs as they settled themselves. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the shift in the air pressure as they realized I was not standing up to hug them. "Chloe," my mother said. Her tone was a mix of caution and irritation. "We are here, you know. Traffic was a nightmare. You could have picked a place closer to the hotel, or what's left of the hotel. Anyway, since we had to downgrade after you pulled that stunt with the cards." "Yeah," Sienna added, the sound of her dropping her purse onto the table echoing in the room. "And Kyle had to fly home economy. It was humiliating. Are you going to turn around? Or are you doing a dramatic villain thing?" I slowly swiveled my chair. They looked different than they had in the Mykonos photo. The tans were still there, but the glowing, carefree aura was gone. My father's shirt was wrinkled. My mother looked tired. Her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the stress lines. Sienna looked bored, scrolling on her phone, likely trying to find a signal in the bunker-like room. They looked at me. I was wearing a black blazer, buttoned to the throat. My hair was pulled back tight. I was not wearing any of the jewelry they had given me over the years. "Well," my father said, clapping his hands together, "we are here. Nice room. A bit excessive, but I guess you are trying to make a point. So, where is the food? I could eat a steak. A big one." "I heard the truffle risotto is to die for," Mom said, picking up a napkin and smoothing it over her lap. "So, Chloe, the message said you have a solution. I assume that means you are ready to stop this nonsense and turn the utilities back on? The house is freezing, literally." "And my landlord is threatening to kick me out on Tuesday," Sienna snapped, finally looking up. "Do you have any idea how stressful that is? I have been crying for 3 days." They waited. They looked at me with expectant, hungry eyes. They asked about the food. They asked about the bill. They asked about the room. They complained about their discomfort. Not one of them asked, "How are you?" Not one of them asked, "Did it hurt when you saw the empty seats?" Not one of them said, "Congratulations, doctor." The silence stretched. It became physical. A third party at the table. "Chloe," Dad said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a warning. "Speak up. Who is paying for this?" "Yeah, and can we order drinks?" Sienna asked. "I need a martini, or 3. I did not speak. I did not blink. I reached out my right hand and pressed the spacebar on my laptop. The projector hummed. The fan kicked into high gear. Behind me, the white wall exploded with light. The first slide appeared. It was simple. White text on a black background, formatted like a title card for a documentary. "This is the cost of admission." My mother frowned, squinting at the screen. "What is that? Is this a presentation? Are we watching a movie?" "It is a PowerPoint," Sienna scoffed. "Oh my God. Did you bring us here to lecture us? Is this about the budget again? Because I told you, I will try to spend less on Uber Eats, okay?" I hit the spacebar again. The next slide faded in. Total expenditures, 2020, 2024, $184,200. The number was displayed in massive red font. "What is this?" Douglas demanded, standing up halfway. "Sit down. Douglas," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but it was so cold it seemed to lower the temperature of the room by 10 degrees. "We are not done." "I am not sitting for this," he sputtered, his face reddening. "You drag us here to show us numbers? We know you help out. That is what families do." "Sit down," I repeated. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice was absolute. It was the voice of the person holding the checkbook. He sat. I hit the spacebar again. The text on the screen changed. It was no longer a number. It was a sentence, a thesis statement for the evening. This is what I had to trade to be a child of this family. "Chloe, stop it," Mom said, her voice trembling slightly. She looked at the door, as if calculating the distance to escape. "You are embarrassing yourself. This is morbid." "You wanted to know the solution," I said, my eyes locking on hers. "You wanted to know how we fix the finances. We are going to fix them by reviewing the ledger, every single line item." "You are insane," Sienna whispered. "You are actually psycho." "Maybe," I said, "but I am a solvent psycho, and you are broke." I looked at the empty chair in the corner. I wished he was here already. But he was running late from rounds. That was fine. He would arrive for the finale. For now, I had to walk them through the fire alone. "Let's begin with the basics," I said. I pressed the button. The slide transitioned. The first image appeared. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a photograph. A photograph of a girl standing at a sink, washing dishes while a party raged in the background. And superimposed over it, the timestamp of a bank transfer I had made 15 years later. The air in the room grew heavy. charged with the ozone smell of an approaching storm. They stopped moving. They stopped looking for the waiter. They stared at the screen, paralyzed by the sudden, terrifying realization that I had been keeping score the entire time. The beam of the projector cut through the gloom of the Hazel room like a scalpel through necrotic tissue. I did not look at them. I looked at the screen, my hand hovering over the laptop keys, acting as the narrator of their own indictment. Exhibit A, I said, my voice flat and clinical. The emergency transmission repair. The slide resolved into focus. On the left side of the screen was a bank transfer receipt from my account to Douglas Cruz for $800, dated July 12th. The subject line read, "Truck repair. Urgent." On the right side of the screen was a screenshot from my mother's Facebook page, dated July 14th. It was the photo of the diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist. The caption, 30 years of love, thank you, Doug, was blown up to the size of a billboard. A stifle of silence suffocated the room. "That is not what it looks like," my father stammered, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "I fixed the truck. I did. That bracelet was... I bought that months ago on a payment plan. You are twisting things." "The jeweler's receipt," I said, ignoring him and pressing the key again. An image of the receipt appeared. Time-stamped July 13th. The amount was $799. "You took the money I sent to save your job," I said. "And you bought jewelry to save your marriage." Next slide. I didn't give them time to breathe. The screen flickered. Exhibit B, the medical emergency. The bank transfer for Sienna's dental work appeared. $500. Next to it, the video of her screaming with laughter in Cabo San Lucas, a bottle of tequila in her hand. Sienna gasped. She physically recoiled, shrinking back into her high-backed chair. "You stalked me?" she screeched, her voice cracking. "That is creepy, Chloe. You are literally stalking my private Instagram." "It is a public profile. Sienna," I said. "And fraud is a public matter. You told me you were in agony. You told me your face was swollen. You lied to extract cash for a vacation." "I was in pain," she lied, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. "The tequila was for the pain. It acts like a numbing agent." Next slide, I said. The image changed. This time, there were no bank statements. It was just a photograph. It was high resolution, sharp, and devastating. It was the view from the stage at Westbridge Institute. The 3 empty seats in row G. The white reserved signs were perfectly legible. They looked like tombstones in a graveyard of good intentions. My mother made a small, choked noise. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling so violently that water sloshed onto the tablecloth. "Chloe, honey," she began, her voice taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone she used when she wanted to smooth over a crack in the plaster. "We told you. It was an emergency. Your father, he had a dizzy spell. We were on our way to the airport, and we had to pull over. We were terrified. We didn't want to worry you on your big day." "A dizzy spell," I repeated. "Yes," Douglas nodded vigorously, latching on to the lie. "My blood pressure, it spiked. We couldn't fly. Doctor's orders." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me that lying was a sin, yet who had built his entire life on a foundation of deceit. "Next slide," I said. The screen exploded with the electric blue of the Aegean Sea. The timestamp was highlighted in yellow. Posted 10:45 a.m., the exact minute I was walking across the stage. The photo showed the 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Sienna, and Kyle, raising toast glasses on the terrace in Mykonos. My father looked the picture of health, a cigar clamped between his teeth. "You recovered from that dizzy spell remarkably fast," I said. "It takes 14 hours to fly to Greece. That means you were already in the air when you supposedly pulled over on the way to the airport. You were never coming. You cashed in the tickets I bought and booked a vacation for yourselves." My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The lie had been decapitated. There was no way to reattach it. And finally, I said, Exhibit D. I zoomed in on the comment section of the post. The words were pixelated but readable. You're not even a real doctor. Sienna turned pale. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at her hands. I didn't mean that, she whispered. It was a joke. It was just banter. You know how we talk. I do know how you talk, I said. I know exactly how you talk when you think I am not listening. Chloe, please, my mother said, tears finally spilling over, tears of embarrassment, not remorse. Turn it off. People are going to come in. This is a nice restaurant. We can talk about this at home. We don't have a home, I said. You have a house that I pay to heat. Sienna has an apartment that I pay the rent on, and I have an apartment where I sit alone and wonder why I am not enough. We love you, Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Damn it, Chloe. We love you. We made mistakes with money. Fine. We are bad with money. But we are family. You don't humiliate your family like this. Love, I said, tasting the word like spoiled milk. Let's listen to your version of love. I reached for the Bluetooth speaker. I turned the volume knob all the way to the right. I pressed play on the audio file. My father's voice boomed through the small, wood-paneled room. It was clearer than it had been on my headphones. The acoustics of the suite amplified every sneer. She is an investment, Lil. You plant the seeds. You wait for the harvest. Douglas froze. His eyes went wide, staring at the speaker as if it were a bomb. She is so desperate for us to like her. It is actually sad. Sienna put her hands over her ears. Stop it, she cried. Turn it off. She is our retirement plan, remember? My mother gasped, pressing her napkin to her mouth. She is not even a real doctor yet. It is all just book stuff. She is smart enough to sign checks. That is all that matters. The laughter at the end of the recording echoed around us, bouncing off the mahogany walls, a grotesque chorus of mockery. It went on for 10 seconds, 10 seconds of them laughing at my pain, at my effort, at my existence. I let it play to the very end. I let the silence that followed settle over them like a shroud. My father was gray. He looked deflated, like a balloon that had been punctured. The bluster was gone. The anger was gone. There was only the naked, ugly truth staring him in the face. My mother was weeping silently, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. Sienna was shaking. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating with terror. She knew what this meant. She knew who paid her rent. She knew who co-signed her lease. She was doing the math in her head, and the sum was 0. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside were the letters Harper Linwood had drafted, the demand letters, the eviction notices, the revocation of power of attorney, the notification of the lawsuit for unjust enrichment. I dropped the file onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, final thud. From this moment forward, I said, my voice steady and devoid of any tremor, I am resigning from the position of family bank. I looked at Douglas. I am not your retirement plan. I am not your investment. And I am certainly not your harvest. I looked at Sienna. I am a real doctor, and the first rule of medicine is to stop the bleeding. You are the wound, Sienna, and I am stitching you up. I looked at my mother. I hope the massage was worth it, because it cost you your daughter. You can't do this, my father rasped. His voice was a shadow of its former self. He reached for the folder, his hand shaking. You can't just cut us off. We have bills, the mortgage, Sienna's car. You have a responsibility to us. We raised you. You didn't raise me, I said. You endured me until I became profitable. Chloe, please, Mom begged, reaching across the table. We can fix this. We will pay you back. We will go to therapy. Just don't. Don't leave us like this. I am not leaving you, I said. I was never with you. I was just the staff. You are ungrateful, Dad suddenly roared, the fear turning back into aggression as he realized begging wouldn't work. He stood up. knocking his chair over. "I forbid this. You hear me? I forbid you to walk out of here. You owe us. You owe us everything." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I looked him in the eye. And for the first time in 28 years, I did not see a giant. I saw a small, greedy man in a wrinkled shirt. "I don't owe you a penny," I said, "but you owe me $18,420 for the last 4 years. You will be hearing from my lawyer about the repayment schedule." "You can't do this," he shouted again, desperate now. "I already did," I replied. I turned my back on them. The image on the screen was still glowing. The photo of me washing dishes while they partied. I walked toward the door. Sienna scrambled up. "Chloe, wait! What about my apartment? The rent is due on Tuesday." I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. I didn't turn around. "Better start selling some of those clothes. Sienna," I said. "I hear the resale market is booming." I opened the door. The cool air of the restaurant hallway hit my face. It felt like oxygen. It felt like life. Behind me, the chaos erupted. Sobbing, shouting, the sound of papers being torn. But it sounded distant, like noise from a television in another room. It was not my noise anymore. I stepped out into the corridor just as the front entrance of the restaurant opened. A man in a gray coat walked in, looking around the lobby. He had kind eyes and a weary, gentle face. It was Dr. Rowan Hale, the owner of the empty chair. My witness had arrived. Dr. Rowan Hale did not just walk into a room, he altered its atmosphere. He was a man in his late 50s, with silver hair cropped close and a posture that had been forged by decades of standing over operating tables and commanding trauma units. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat over a navy suit, and he carried a leather satchel that looked as worn and reliable as his expression. I stepped back, holding the door open for him. The air in the private dining suite, previously thick with the humidity of my family's panic and rage, suddenly seemed to crystallize. My father, who had been in the middle of shouting about forbidden departures and parental rights, choked on his own words. He looked at the stranger, then at me, confusing the dynamic. In Douglas Cruz's world, men of this caliber were the ones he tried to impress at the country club, not the ones who walked in on his family arguments. "Who is this?" my father demanded. Though his voice had lost its thunder, he adjusted his wrinkled collar, instinctually trying to look presentable. "Chloe, who is this man?" Dr. Hale did not look at my father. He walked past him, past the overturned chair, past the sobbing figure of my mother, and walked straight to the head of the table. He looked at the projection screen, which was still displaying the image of me washing dishes superimposed with the bank transfer receipts. He studied it for a moment, his face unreadable, like he was examining an X-ray for a fracture. Then, he turned to face them. "I am Dr. Rowan Hale," he said. His voice was a baritone rumble, calm but carrying a weight that made the silverware vibrate. "I am the Chief of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Westbridge Institute. I am Chloe's superior, and, I suppose, I am the only person in this room who actually knows who she is." "Her boss?" Sienna wiped her nose, her eyes narrowing. "Great. Did she tell you she is stealing from us? Because that is what is happening. She is cutting us off." Dr. Hale looked at Sienna. He didn't sneer, but there was a pity in his eyes that was far worse than anger. "She is not stealing from you," he said. "She is stopping you from looting a building that you helped set on fire." My mother gasped. "Excuse me? You have no right?" He placed his hands on the back of the empty chair, the witness chair I had set for him, and leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "Last November, we had a patient come in, Mrs. Gable, 70 years old. She presented with vague back pain and weakness in her legs. The ER doctors dismissed it as arthritis. They wanted to send her home with painkillers. They said she was old, and old people hurt. The room was dead silent. Even my father was listening, caught in the gravity of Hale's storytelling. Chloe was on rotation, Dr. Hale continued. She had just finished a 16-hour shift. She should have gone home. She was exhausted. I saw her walking down the hall, holding onto the wall to keep herself upright, but she didn't leave. She sat with Mrs. Gable. She listened to her. She noticed a subtle asymmetry in her reflexes that everyone else had missed. She noticed a temperature fluctuation in her lower extremities. I remembered that night. I remembered the smell of the hospital linen and the fear in Mrs. Gable's eyes. I remembered thinking that if I went home, nobody would look at her again until morning, and by then it might be too late. Chloe woke me up at 3 a.m, Dr. Hale said. She demanded an MRI. She risked being reprimanded for overstepping her rank. She fought for that patient when the attending physician told her to let it go. And do you know what we found? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. A spinal epidural abscess, he said. An infection pressing on her spinal cord. If we had waited another 6 hours, Mrs. Gable would have been paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of her life. Because of Chloe. That woman walked out of the hospital 2 weeks later to hold her first great-grandchild. My mother looked down at her hands. My father looked at the wall. I called Chloe into my office the next day to commend her. Dr. Hale said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Do you know what she said? She apologized. She thought she was in trouble. She was so conditioned to believe that she was a burden, that her instincts were wrong, that she couldn't accept praise. She sat in my chair and shook because she thought I was going to fire her for saving a life. He pointed a finger at my father. That is your legacy. Mr. Cruz, you didn't build a doctor. You built a victim. And she had to tear herself apart and rebuild herself from the ground up to become the woman who saved that patient. We pushed her to be excellent, my father muttered, but it was a weak defense, a paper shield against a flamethrower. We were hard on her so she would succeed. No, Dr. Hale said sharply. You were hard on her because it was profitable. There is a difference between pressure and exploitation. I have seen the records she showed me. I have seen the hours she worked. She succeeded despite you. Not because of you. She is a diamond that formed in the dark, while you were busy admiring the rhinestones you put on her sister. Sienna flinched as if she had been slapped. Dr. Hale turned and walked over to where I was standing by the door. I felt a lump in my throat so large I could barely breathe. In 28 years, no one had ever stood between me and them. No one had ever acted as a shield. He placed a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a casual gesture. It was an anchor. It was a validation. She is the finest resident I have had in 20 years, Dr. Hale told them. She is brilliant. She is compassionate. And she has a future that is so bright it would blind you if you actually bothered to look at it. But you won't get to see it, because you don't deserve a seat at her table. She is our daughter, my mother wailed, the reality finally crashing down on her. You can't just take her away. We are a family. You are not a family, Dr. Hale said. You are a parasite, and the host has finally taken the medicine. Sienna suddenly burst into tears. But they were not tears of shame. They were the frantic, ugly tears of a child realizing the candy store is closed forever. But what about me? She sobbed, looking at me with mascara streaming down her face. Chloe, seriously, I can't get evicted. My friends, what will I tell people? I can't move back to Redwood Hollow. It is a hole. You can't do this to me. I am your sister. I was your sister when you were laughing at me in Cabo, I said softly. I said I was sorry, she screamed. What else do you want? Blood? I have given you blood, I said. I have given you sweat. I have given you tears. I am fresh out of fluids. Sienna. My mother stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She walked toward me, her hands outstretched, palms up in a pleading gesture. Chloe, please, she begged. Just give us a chance. We will change. We will pay you back. I will get a job. Dad will sell the truck. Just don't cut us off. Don't let a stranger tell you who your family is. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had handed me a stale cupcake while she planned a pony party for her other daughter. I looked at the woman who had used my heating money for a hot stone massage. I felt a strange sensation. It was the absence of weight. The heavy, crushing burden of seeking her approval was gone. It had simply evaporated. I stepped out from under Dr. Hale's hand, standing on my own 2 feet. I looked her in the eye. "Lillian," I said. I didn't call her Mom. The title felt wrong now. "I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing this to save myself." "But we love you," she whispered. "No," I said. "You love what I provide, and I am all out of inventory." I straightened my blazer. I looked at the 3 of them, the father who saw me as an investment, the mother who saw me as a utility, and the sister who saw me as a rival to be exploited. "Kindness is not an obligation," I said, my voice ringing clear in the silent room. "It is a gift, and you have returned it unopened for 20 years, so I am taking it back." I took a deep breath. "From now on," I said, "everyone lives for themselves. I suggest you start figuring out how that works. I hear the job market in Redwood Hollow is tough." For the first time in the history of the Cruz family, there was absolute silence. No rebuttals, no gaslighting, no guilt trips, just the hollow, ringing silence of a truth that could not be argued with. Dr. Hale nodded at me. A small, proud smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Ready, Doctor?" he asked. "I have been ready for a long time," I said. I turned around and walked into the hallway, leaving the door wide open behind me, so they could watch me walk away. I didn't look back to see if they were crying. I didn't look back to see if they were angry. I just walked, and with every step, the air tasted sweeter. I walked out of the hazel room, and the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me with a sound that felt final, like the closing of a coffin lid. For a moment, I stood in the hallway, listening. I could hear the muffled baritone of my father shouting, a sound that used to make my stomach turn into knots of anxiety. I could hear the high-pitched, frantic keen of Sienna realizing that her free ride had just pulled out of the station. But here, on the other side of the wood, the sounds were dull. They lacked teeth. They were just noise, no different from the clatter of silverware or the hum of the ventilation system. Dr. Hale walked beside me in silence until we reached the lobby. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't tell me I was brave, even though I felt like I had just survived a war. He simply stopped near the coat check, looked at me, and nodded. "I will see you at rounds tomorrow, Dr. Cruz," he said. "Get some sleep. You have a career to build." "Thank you, Rowan," I said. It was the first time I had used his first name. It felt right. He turned and walked out into the night, a man who had done his part and knew when to exit the stage. I stayed for a second longer. The maitre d' approached me, looking nervous. He had likely heard the commotion from the back room. "Dr. Cruz," he whispered, "is everything all right? Should I call security?" I looked at him and smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. "No need," I said. "My guests are just finishing their dinner. It is fully paid for. Let them eat. It is the last meal they will be getting on the house." I pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The night air was biting. The wind whipped down the avenue, carrying the scent of rain and city exhaust. But to me, it smelled like sterilization. It smelled like the scrub room before surgery, clean, sharp, and ready for something new. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with oxygen that felt like it belonged solely to me for the first time in 28 years. I heard the door open behind me. "Chloe!" It was my father's voice. He had run out onto the street. He sounded desperate, stripped of his arrogance. "Chloe, wait! You can't just walk away. We have no way to get back to the hotel. The Uber app isn't working on my phone." I didn't break my stride. I didn't pause. I didn't turn my head. I kept walking toward the valet stand, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the pavement. "Chloe!" he screamed again, his voice cracking. "I am your father!" I kept walking. I realized then that silence wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a weapon. It was a shield. By not answering, by not engaging, I was denying him the fuel he needed to burn me. I was starving the fire. I reached the valet stand, the attendant, A young guy I had tipped generously on arrival, saw me coming and sprinted to retrieve my car. As I waited, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a single, long buzz. I pulled it out. The screen illuminated my face in the darkness. It was an email notification from Harper Linwood. Subject: Execution of asset severance, confirmed. I opened the email. The text was brief and beautiful in its brutality. Dear Dr. Cruz, this email is to confirm that all supplementary credit cards have been deactivated as of 8 o'clock p.m. The fraud alerts have been filed regarding the Mykonos transactions. The notice of lease guarantor withdrawal has been sent electronically to your sister's landlord and will be served physically tomorrow morning. Your parents' cell phone plans have been suspended. The authorized user removal for the car insurance policies is complete. You are legally clear. Harper. I stared at the words, "You are legally clear." A sensation washed over me that I can only describe as weightlessness. It felt as if gravity had released its hold on my shoulders. The invisible backpack of rocks, the guilt, the obligation, the fear of their rejection, had simply vanished. I felt light. I felt buoyant. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the restaurant. I didn't see the girl who washed dishes while her sister opened presents. I didn't see the tired medical student eating peanut butter crackers for dinner so she could pay for a roof repair. I didn't see the shadow who stood in the back of family photos. I saw a woman in a black blazer with a spine made of steel. I saw a doctor. I saw someone who had just performed the most difficult amputation of her life and had survived the blood loss. The valet pulled my car up to the curb. It was a modest sedan, reliable and paid for with my own money. He opened the door for me. "Have a good night, ma'am," he said. "It is a beautiful night," I replied. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cool against my back. I locked the doors. It was a small click, but it sounded like a vault ceiling. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing on the sidewalk, waving his arms in frustration. It was small, it was distant, and then, as I turned the corner, it was gone. I didn't drive back to my old apartment. I had moved out 3 days ago. A tactical decision Harper had advised. "If you cut them off, they will come to your door," she had said. "Be somewhere they cannot find." I drove toward the north side of the city, to a quiet neighborhood lined with trees that were just starting to bloom for spring. I drove to a building with a secure gate and a doorman who didn't know the name Cruz. The drive was 20 minutes of pure, unadulterated peace. I didn't turn on the radio. I listened to the hum of the engine and the sound of the tires on the asphalt. I thought about the $14,000. It was a lot of money. It was a painful loss. But then I corrected myself. It wasn't a loss. It was a severance package. It was the price of my freedom. And honestly, looking back at the misery of the last decade, $14,000 was a bargain. I would have paid double to feel this light. I parked in my new assigned spot. I took the elevator up to the 6th floor. My new apartment was sparse. There were boxes still unpacked in the corner. The furniture was minimal, but it was mine. Every inch of it was paid for by me. For me. There were no ghosts here. There were no echoes of "you owe us" bouncing off the walls. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a hotel room that was no longer paid for, my family was realizing that the ATM was broken. They were realizing that actions have consequences. They were realizing that the investment had decided to close the account. I didn't feel happy. Exactly. Happiness feels bubbly. This felt deeper. It felt like justice. I walked over to my desk. I sat down and opened my laptop. I didn't open the spreadsheet of debts. I didn't open the folder of evidence. I deleted the factual corrections folder. I didn't need it anymore. The corrections had been made. I opened a blank document. For years, I had been writing my life in the margins of their story. I had been a supporting character in the drama of Sienna and Douglas and Lillian. I had been the prop, the wallet, the background noise. I placed my fingers on the keys. The cursor blinked, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat waiting for a command. I wasn't writing a revenge story anymore. Revenge is about looking back. Revenge is about settling scores. I was done with scores. This was about looking forward. I typed the header, Chapter 1. I didn't know what the rest of the page would say yet. I didn't know who I would meet, where I would travel, or what I would achieve now that I wasn't carrying 3 adults on my back. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever words appeared on this page, they would be mine. The narrative belonged to me now. I typed the first sentence. My name is Dr. Chloe Cruz, and today is the first day I am living for myself. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath, listening to the beautiful, perfect silence of my new life. The screen glowed in the darkness, a blank canvas, waiting for a masterpiece. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment down below, and let's share our thoughts on Chloe's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear about Chloe's victory.